Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is the last day of January, January 31st. Today is day 117 since October 7th, 2023. Thank you to all of those who joined us in prayer this morning. I'm grateful for our Wednesday prayer gatherings online. And so you're welcome to join us for those next week. So today, day 117. The world continues to be concerned about how the United States will respond to the drone strike that killed 3 American troops in Jordan over the weekend. President Joe Biden said yesterday that he knows how the U.S. will respond, but he said, I don't think we need a wider war in the Middle East. An Iran-backed militia group claimed responsibility for the attack on the U.S. military base, but the world continues to be concerned. Iran told the U.S. via intermediaries that if the United States strikes Iranian soil directly, Tehran will strike back at American assets in the Middle East. The warning comes as Iran has been on high alert on how Biden and the American government will respond. And U.S. bases in Syria and Iraq and throughout the Middle East have suffered more than 160 attacks of various degrees of seriousness since the October 7th attacks. There also was a raid on a hospital in Jenin, the northern city in the occupied Palestinian territories of the West Bank, which drew international critique as Israeli forces killed 3 members of Palestinian armed groups. This occurred in a hospital in the West Bank city. CCTV footage showed members of an undercover unit that were described as medics going into a hospital. They were also disguised as civilians, and they made their way through the hospital with their rifles raised. The Israeli military said that men were hiding in the Jenin hospital, and they said that one of them was about to carry out an attack. The International Committee of the Red Cross and the Guardian of the Geneva Conventions, which codify international humanitarian law, expressed concern over the raid. They said under international humanitarian laws, hospital and medical patients should be respected and protected at all times. As part of its confidential dialogue with concerned authorities is an issue that they raised. In terms of conversations about a potential ceasefire in exchange for the release of hostages, a framework continues to be discussed via intermediaries between Israel and Hamas. It would include the release of all Israeli civilian hostages that have been held in the Strip in exchange for a 6-week ceasefire. We've been hearing the possibility of 2 months, 3 months. We've been hearing different lengths of time. This is backed by the U.S., Qatar, and Egypt, according to the Washington Post. According to the report, Palestinian prisoners who are held in Israeli prisons would be released in exchange at a rate of 3-to-1. The proposal would include the condition of a non-permanent repositioning of Israeli forces away from the most densely populated areas of the Strip. It also would include an increase in humanitarian aid to Gaza, in addition to additional truces beyond those initial 6 weeks, during which the bodies of hostages who've been killed previously would be released, and during which the remaining soldiers who are still or would still be held hostage would also be released. The number of Palestinian prisoners, Hamas reported that the number of Palestinian prisoners had not yet been specified. The U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan met in Washington, D.C. with family members of Israeli hostages and former hostages. Far-right National Security Minister in Israel, Ben-Gvir, said he opposes the potential deal with Hamas, adding that a ridiculous deal means the dissolution of the government. But interestingly, the Israeli opposition leader, Lapid, said that his party agrees to enter the government to replace the far right religious Zionism party in order to promote a hostage deal. So there's a question of whether or not the Netanyahu coalition can stay together. And if Lapid replaces Ben-Gvir, it's possible that the current coalition could fall, but a new coalition could be reformed. The Israeli Defense Forces, this is according to Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper is scaling down its presence in the Strip, leaving one reservist brigade within Gaza. Now that's just reservist brigades. That doesn't mean there's only one brigade total. The Division 162 is operating in North Gaza around the Al-Shati refugee camp, where Hamas appears to be attempting to rehabilitate its local regiment. Again, that's according to Haaretz. The death toll being reported by the Gaza Health Ministry, which is currently has the death toll at 26,900 Palestinians, and the total wounded is at 65,949. There was an article in The Guardian about children being the most affected in Gaza. And the article was talking about how of the population of 2.3 million people in Gaza, who've had their lives shattered by this war, while Israel is talking about, its attempt to avoid civilian casualty, it's issued evacuation orders. We know that sometimes people have been ordered to evacuate, and the places where they've been ordered to evacuate have also been bombed. That more than 11,500 children who are under the age of 18 have been killed, according to Palestinian health officials. And there have been even more than that in terms of the number of children who've been injured. And while the numbers are hard to come by in terms of the number of children who've been orphaned, according to the Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor, it's a nonprofit group, they have calculated that more than 24,000 children have lost one or both parents in Gaza already. And so just that there is such desperate need and such significant loss. And the horrors of those losses continue for Palestinian children who have lost family members. When we think about also the October 7th attacks for Jewish children who have lost parents, one horror does not in any way mitigate another horror. And so it means our work calling for a ceasefire and calling for an end to violence is all the more critical. We also know that Norway, which is a top donor to the UN agency of UNRWA, is urging countries that have cut funding to UNRWA to consider the consequences of their actions on Gazans. The head of the World Health Organization also warned that halting funding to UNRWA can lead to catastrophic consequences for people in Gaza. And so we also are calling for the United States and others to reinstate funding. UNRWA is the UN refugee agency. Israel has alleged that some of the staff members of UNRWA participated in the October 7th attacks. UNRWA has initiated immediate investigations of those accusations. And the argument being made by Norway and others is do not punish the children and those surviving on the humanitarian assistance that UNRWA is providing right now. We also know that in other areas around Israel, Israel has had escalations in the Golan Heights, which is the occupied territory that was taken in the Six-Day War from Syria. The IDF said it struck Syrian army posts overnight there. We know that escalations and conflict has continued between Hezbollah and Israel at the northern border of Israel and the southern border of Lebanon. We also know within Israel that there have been protests that are seeking to limit humanitarian assistance from going into Gaza. Protests in recent days against the transfer of humanitarian aid into Gaza while Hamas still holds Israeli hostages. So the chief of the IDF Southern Command designated the Nitzana border crossing with Egypt a closed military zone to try to limit the effect of those protests. We also know the leaders of the United States Reform Movement, the largest Jewish denomination in the United States, said that they were deeply dismayed by Prime Minister Netanyahu's recent dismissal of the possibility of a two-state solution. that would provide the Palestinians with their own state. So that's the largest Jewish denomination here in the United States. And then things have still continued to be unresolved in terms of the Houthis in Yemen. The EU foreign policy chief said that he is hopeful it could be decided on Wednesday which member state would lead the upcoming EU mission to protect vessels in the Red Sea from Houthi militant attacks. So that is an update in terms of things happening in relation to the Middle East. May we continue to call for a ceasefire, continue to pray, and to work together toward peace.